What's going on, workforce? Brian here.
Chris here.
And what if your job gets nerfed? This is going to be a semi guide because we
It's
see
a it's
this,
a broader
yeah,
topic.
broader
What
topic.
happens if the expansion impacts the way you played Shadowbringers?
Yeah, and so we want to look at it because we've seen this happen time and time again with different expansions, and we hope that like whatever and whenever you're finding this video that you can like follow the advice here so you don't find yourself caught off guard. Now, that's not to say that it will happen, but I know there's astrologians out there that didn't like the change to astrologian. And and we see this. Like one of the things that always the thought I have with every expansion is that we don't just get like 2 jobs. We actually get 18 jobs. Like when you look at all the jobs themselves, they get restructured, re-reviewed, changed up, and there is a potential that it doesn't necessarily work out in your favor. It could work out in your favor for machinists out there. I've really enjoyed those changes, but we want to sit down and kind of talk with you guys one-on-one, or 2-on-1 in this case, to kind of help you guys be prepared for 6.0 or prepared for whenever you watch this video for whatever is coming in the future. So Chris, why don't you take it from here first? Like what would be your first like piece of advice to somebody who is looking ahead, whether they're excited or concerned? What could they be doing today?
I mean, so expansions, this is more of a trait than with patches, but it happens with patches. There's people who didn't like the Monk Grease Lightning change. There's people who did. And I think the first thing to remember is perspective. This is a set of devs who care. They're incredibly transparent. They try very hard. They put in the work, and it shows. And they regularly not only put in the work, but it lands on a good feet. It doesn't. It's not even like, oh, they're trying and failing. No, they're trying and succeeding. So just remember, first and foremost, when it comes to job design, when it comes to job balance, when it comes to balancing any aspect of the game you like, and how much of it, how little of it, how it feels, and how it's handled when it's introduced. All of that is from a place of good intent.
Mm-hmm.
All of that, remember, nobody woke up and said, today's the day I finally ruin that job I hate.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. Every job, their goal is to make an enjoyable and different perspective of this game. And sometimes that won't align with you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in a goal to make, I didn't like the tanking change to the tank stance. I think it removed some depth from enmity within normal content, right? Where topping the DPS meter isn't the sole measure. I think I felt it nerf things, but the reason for it was to lower the skill floor, to invite more people to be tanks. And as a result, we have a lot of people who've tried tanking for the very first time. So It was well-intentioned, and even some of that intention did manifest. It just didn't align personally with me.
Right. And so I would go ahead and take it another step. So as a part of preparation for patches or whatever, one of the strengths this game offers is the ability to play multiple jobs on your same character. So I would ask you to kind of consider, is it the role that you're more attracted to, or is it something where you just have a backup option in this case? And so you could look at it based off of the 5 roles that the game, basically breaks up everybody into. It's really 3, but we kind of split out the DPS into different categories. Actually, everybody's a DPS. It just matters what color of DPS you are, blue, green, or red. But in that regards, like if you're let's say you love Dragoon, like what I would say is that if you're like, one thing you can do if you really like that physical upfront melee is maybe check out like Samurai. And these are just some examples. It could be any of the melee classes. If that is something that is your bread and butter, have a backup option that is already at cap. Something that you can do in like your spare time in that regard, something that you're not like stressed to level. Because the concern that I have and what I've seen happen is that, let's say they like just mess up Dragoon unintentionally, but you're like, I don't like it. Happened with me with Summoner. So like, speaking of myself, I don't like the Summoner changes that they rolled in with Shadowbringers. I can't do it. And that's okay. Like if there's a Summoner out there that loves it, great. I'm not sitting here angry about it, because guess what? I already have Black Mage and I already have Red Mage. I have those jobs to play, and I can go and find those enjoyments there. I am not in this case sitting where I am leveling up a job from 1, starting over from scratch. So I don't sit here like, oh, they changed Summoner and I don't like it. What's my option? Well, I need to start leveling Thaumaturge at level 1 now. Well, like that ends up being a little bit bigger of a burn because I am at that moment unsatisfied with it. So one of the things you can do is just like, whether it's within the same role or within a different role, is have a secondary job that you're just feeding some experience into, so that
do some MSQ roulette, do some leveling roulettes. Just between now and the expansion, if you just do those semi-regularly, you're going to be nice and high leveled, if not at cap before the expansion. just doing a couple roulettes on a secondary job.
And then that way, if you find that the change that they made isn't something that you were excited about, you're not sitting here stressed to try and start over from scratch. And that's where I've seen a lot of people, get really frustrated and hurt by the changes, because the changes are intended to be positive, but
Right.
not always will that be the case, because this is a game that's not built off of omnipotence and knowledge and knowing every last number that
Right.
needs to be adjusted, because that's why we have patches. That's why we have
Right.
changes.
Some jobs
after.
even get nerfed to bring the other jobs more in alignment.
Right.
It's usually they're bringing everybody else up, but every once in a while they have to nerf something.
So the other side of the coin is, outside of having a secondary job leveled up. This is something that I think is really interesting when it comes to the overall holistic nature of the jobs themselves, is that as you play and as you kind of level and you gear, it's important to kind of balance that out. So that way, from a gear perspective, you're not being overrun with excess gear that's awful on different tiers, right? So when you're sitting here, because armory chest space is limited, and that's
It's been said that he may be addressing that this next expansion.
right. Anyway, well, that's always a thing. Hey, we've increased, no matter
Yeah,
what.
but this time we're actually running out of armory space in our main hand area. So at some point, we don't have the ability to store enough weapons.
Right. So just keep in mind that as a part of that, when you're also doing that leveling and bringing up those additional, jobs in that case, look at it also in kind of a tiered section of 50, 60, 70, 80, and going on. So that kind of gear is shared across certain roles. So that way you can essentially kind of maximize your, just your storage. So you're not sitting here having all of this leveling gear spread out across the board. So just kind of keep in mind when you're playing around with that. Chris, what are other kind of thoughts or advice would you have to somebody who is finding themselves in a tough situation?
I think focusing on the good really helps me swallow something. So if I was frustrated with the castrum thing, we've talked about it plenty. It just made me engage with Beaujolais, but that's fine because I went off and I leveled up my other tanks through a bunch of leveling content. And I did Heaven on High and Palace of the Dead with Brian, and I went and engaged in Ishgard Restoration, which, since I wasn't racing, I didn't get as burned out on as I know people who were playing 20 hours a week may feel very differently than me, who was just viewing it as more of I'm getting experience and I'm spectating. This is so fun. I know those of you that were hard grinding 19 billion hours a day, it may have felt differently. But I was getting cool new mounts. I got a bunch of jobs leveled. I get to repair my own gear now. And so it's just focusing on something else. This game is enormous. This game is mostly positive. So even if the story takes a turn you don't like, even if it doesn't matter what aspect of the game, as we go into the next expansion, which the expansions are the single largest patch type drops that we get. It's a huge chunk of content. It is a whole game in itself dropped in one go that they are going to continue to support 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5 over a 2-year cycle. And then we're going to do it again. That initial drop is going to have a lot of content in it. So even if, what they choose for a crossover event isn't your thing, what they choose for a beast tribe isn't your thing, do something else. There is so much here that you may find you're wow, I've never done hunts, and I found this Discord that runs a hunt train, and I just had so much fun. That my suggestion would be, if you're feeling your job isn't good, if you're feeling whatever it is, we kind of centered this on jobs, but if there's some aspect of the game that hits you negatively through all this news, we're about to get a lot of positive news next week. We're sitting down with Mr. Happy to record a podcast, probably right now-ish, when this video goes live. And then we're going to have that come out over the next couple of days. And then we're going to go into a big patch the following day on Tuesday. We're going to go into a huge, our basically fan fest-ish first thing that on Friday after this releases. It's exciting, but there's going to be parts of it that somebody goes, that's not for me. They talked about Blue Mage for 30 minutes. Great. During an 8-hour stream or 6-hour stream. What else did they say?
The other to kind of piggyback off of Chris's point, the other thing we also see from time to time is that when these changes are announced, a lot of people try to run math based off of the current system and job design,
right,
versus that of the new changes and the new potency calculations. So typically we see a lot of unfortunate drama and stress around changes because people are oh, that's a nerf and that's going to be horrible, and that they just killed the game and they ruined it and they made it super casual, and the game is but
you don't see gear and you don't see bosses and you don't see mechanics.
Yeah. So don't get too much caught up in the drama whenever like these kind of changes, in case like people are out there saying like, oh, this is the worst change possible. Like, honestly, the best case scenario is not to, like, it's fine to read up on it, to educate yourself on like what the community is thinking. Just be careful with that regards when it comes down to it, because ultimately that's going to be something that typically people go, oh, I really like it. Sometimes it's like, yeah,
they may reveal a few new skills for the new healer.
Yeah.
And people are immediately, as a point of perspective, going to say, what would happen if we had those abilities on a healer in current content?
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thought exercise, but it is inherently flawed. So just take it for what it is. It's a thought exercise. It's a guess.
Now, the final thought that I have that I wanted to share with you guys comes down into the form of synergy with jobs themselves. Typically, whenever a new job is introduced as a part of a role, you could see kind of like almost a shuffling of responsibilities of what makes your job special, and it might end up on the new job, or something that your job didn't do might end up having that as a skill that is brought in to help with the synergy within the role itself. So like, again, when we look at the 5 different roles that the game that separates everything based off of, the best case scenario, the base example of this is when they introduced Dancer into the Machinist and Bard like section. Before, Bard was more heavily based off of those different kind of buffs, and while they still have a part of that as their identity, Dancer did take over a lot of that utility in that category, allowing Bard to be a little bit more focused, Machinist to be a little bit more focused, and Dancer to be a little bit more focused. So as, let's say, the theory would be that they would introduce maybe a new healer. Note that within the healing spectrum, that might take some responsibilities and shift a couple of things. White Mage could change, Scholar could change, Astrologian could change to make that synergy between the different healers, just like we see with the tanks and the DPS, kind of balance those things out. So just keep in mind that, like, as a part of when we're talking about leveling another job within the space, especially whenever there's an addition, anything can change, and that is something that can be both exciting and also frustrating. So just that's why it's important to just have a backup plan, and that might be why it might be valuable to invest in another job outside of the role that you typically like to play, because that way you don't end up going and saying, oh no. But that's the thoughts that I had when it comes to synergy, when it comes to leveling alternate jobs, and then also pieces of content. Chris, do you have any final thoughts or anything else we want to kind of break down?
No. I mean, I think I would say that as we move from here to the end of the expansion, just keep in mind that 5.5 is the end here. So like, if you want to go get best in slot gear, I'm interested in doing it on at least my crafters and gatherers and starting to gear up my tanks a little more. Just keep in mind that gear is going to expire, as opposed to something like going and running stuff for mounts where those mounts don't expire. So as you're kind of deciding what to do with your time, as you're deciding, okay, while I'm leveling this other job, what else should I be doing? Just keep in mind that this is the end of an expansion. It's a great time to go around and try things you've never tried, grab things one last time. But if you choose to spend all of your time grinding your relics to cap, and then they're replaced at level 85, that can feel really frustrating with, you're like, well, if I'd known that, I would have been farming, I would have been going back and doing all of the old extremes to get mounts or something. It's like, okay, we do know that. So like, just for anybody that maybe this is their first expansion, or maybe it's just something that's been forgotten because we've all been inside too long. But like, just remember, like, at the end of an expansion, it's a great chance to go around and try everything one last time, or get that clear of something you've always wanted to clear. But keep in mind that we are moving into the final season and we're setting up for hype.
All right, guys. If you have your own tips, your own advice for players out there, things that maybe some personal stories, sound off in the comments below, so that way you guys don't have to just take our words for it. Like, look at what the community's saying. We always were just like, yeah, if you guys like us, and that's awesome. If you don't, there's lots of great content creators. There's also like 14 Reddit. Like, there's lots of ways to get plugged in.
Lots of new ones.
To the community, and lots of new people coming to check out this game too. Especially that free trial is legit. So we're going to wrap up today. Thanks, guys. If you guys want to go hang out with us on Twitch, we've got Mr. Happy as a part of the podcast. Chris is live Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then occasionally you'll see me pop up as well. So it's been a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for the Lurk Force being a part of it. But for Work to Game, my name's Brian.
My name's Chris.
Thanks so much for being here, and we hope to see you on our next one. But until then,
take care.